someone is speaking against your money, cancel their words tonight. Florence Scovel Shinn. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word is the most creative force you carry, more powerful than any bank statement, more binding than any signature, because it sets the law of your supply in motion, whether you speak in faith or in fear. There is an old verse tucked into the book of Proverbs that says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." And I want you to feel the weight of that phrase for a moment, because it does not say death and life are in the power of your bank account. It does not say death and life are in the power of the economy. It says they are in the power of the tongue, meaning the words spoken over you, and the words you allow to sit unchallenged in your own mind, are literally deciding what fruit shows up in your life. So when someone speaks doubt over your money, when a parent says you will always struggle, when a coworker laughs at your dream, when your own tired voice whispers there is never enough, that is a seed being planted in the soil of your consciousness. And consciousness, Florence Scovel Shinn taught, is the one soil that never refuses a seed. It grows whatever is planted, weeds or wheat, without asking whether you meant to plant it. So no seed like that has to be allowed to grow, simply because it was dropped there by someone else's careless tongue. You have the power tonight to pull it up by the root, before it ever has the chance to flower into another month of struggle. So before we go further, let us plant our own word in place of theirs. Say this with me, out loud if you can. No one on earth can speak poverty over my life. God supplies my every need at every turn. My word is my wand. Say it with me. No one on earth can speak poverty over my life. God supplies my every need at every turn. My word is my wand. Again. No one on earth can speak poverty over my life. God supplies my every need at every turn. My word is my wand. Now, before we move into the keys, I want you to do one small thing for me. Type the words God supplies in the comments right now. Not because I need to see it, but because the moment you type it, you are speaking it, and speaking it begins to loosen every word that has ever been spoken against you. So type it. God supplies. Let it be the first stone you lay tonight. The first key is noticing the words that were spoken over you before you ever had a chance to speak for yourself. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that most people are living out prophecies they did not write. Someone else, a parent, a teacher, an old partner, spoke a sentence over their life years ago, and that sentence became a program running quietly in the background of every decision they make about money. Maybe someone told you as a child that money does not grow on trees, and said it so often, so sharply, that the words became a wall. Maybe a boss once told you that you would never be management material, and you carried that sentence into every job since. Maybe a grandmother sighed at the kitchen table and said we simply are not the kind of family that gets ahead, and that sigh became a family inheritance, far more binding than any actual inheritance ever could have been. Tonight I want you to become the noticer. Sit quietly and ask yourself, whose voice is this? When I think I will never have enough. Whose sentence am I repeating? When I flinch at an invoice, whose fear taught me to flinch first? Because once you can name the voice, you take away its disguise. It can no longer pretend to be your own thought. It becomes what it truly is, a borrowed word, spoken long ago, that you have been paying rent on ever since, sometimes for 20 years, sometimes for 40, without ever once questioning the lease. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that you owe that word nothing, not one more day of belief, not one more month of rent. The noticing itself begins to loosen its grip, because consciousness cannot stay hypnotized once it is truly seen. The moment you say, "Ah, that is not my thought, that belongs to someone else," you have already begun to set it down, and a word set down, even for a moment, is a word that has lost its throne. The second key is refusing to argue with the appearance. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the moment someone speaks a negative word over your money, the temptation is to defend yourself, to explain, to prove them wrong with logic, to pull out spreadsheets and statistics and convince them you are not who they think you are. But arguing with a negative word only feeds it more attention, more energy, more life. Every argument you build against a fear is still built entirely out of that fear's own materials. Instead, she taught the art of the calm refusal, which is simply this: you do not fight the word, you starve it. So when your uncle says the economy is terrible and no one is hiring, you do not need to convince him otherwise. You do not need to win the conversation. You simply refuse to let his sentence become your sentence. Silently, gently, you say to yourself, "That is his word, not mine. My supply comes from a source no economy can touch." This is not denial of the outer world. It is a refusal to let the outer world dictate your inner state. And there is a difference between seeing a condition and swearing allegiance to it. You can see rain outside the window without becoming rain yourself. Think of it like this: if a radio in the next room is playing a station you do not like, you do not have to storm in and unplug it. You do not have to argue with the announcer through the wall. You simply turn the dial in your own room to a different frequency, and that is what a calm refusal does. It changes your frequency without wasting a single ounce of energy fighting theirs. Florence Scovel Shinn often reminded her students that whatever you resist with fear, you make more permanent. But whatever you release without fear, you allow to dissolve on its own. This is why the person who calmly says, "That is not for me, thank you," tends to walk untouched through rooms full of gloom, while the person who stays to argue every pessimist into silence often leaves more shaken than when they arrived. So the next time a negative word comes flying toward you, whether from a stranger, a headline, a family group chat, or your own doubting thought at 3 in the morning, let it fly past you like wind past a mountain. The mountain does not chase the wind. The mountain does not demand the wind apologize. The mountain simply stands, rooted, immovable, weathering every storm exactly the same, unchanged underneath. And that rootedness is available to you the instant you decide your peace is worth more than being right, and your supply is worth more than winning an argument with a frightened relative at a holiday dinner. The third key is speaking the word of cancellation, and this is the heart of tonight's teaching, because it is not enough to simply ignore a negative word. It is not enough to walk past it and hope it fades quietly on its own over years. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that certain words must be actively cancelled, spoken over, undone in the same currency in which they were spoken, which is the currency of speech. Words were used to build the wall, so words must be used to tear it down. So if someone said to you, "You will always be broke," you do not just walk away and try to forget it. You find a quiet moment, maybe tonight before sleep, maybe right now as you listen, and you say out loud or under your breath, "That word is cancelled. It has no power in my life. I am divinely supplied now and always." This is what she called erasing the writing on the wall. Imagine an old chalkboard from years ago, with someone else's handwriting scrawled across it in heavy chalk letters. Maybe it says you are careless with money. Maybe it says people like us never get ahead. You would not try to build your future by writing gently underneath their words, hoping yours might quietly show through beside theirs. That never works. The old handwriting bleeds through no matter how brightly you write beside it. You would take the eraser and clear the board completely first, and then, only then, write your own words fresh and clean across the open space. Cancellation is that eraser. It is not aggressive. It is not fearful. It is not shouted in anger at whoever spoke the original word. It is simply final, said once with quiet authority, the way a judge closes a case. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word, said with feeling and conviction, rearranges the very atoms of a situation, because the word does not stay in the air. It moves down into substance, into circumstance, into the details of your bank account and your opportunities and the phone calls that come or do not come. So tonight, cancel what needs canceling. Name it if you must. Say the word that was spoken against you, even if it embarrasses you to say it out loud, even if it is an old wound you would rather not touch. Say it plainly, and then say clearly, that word is canceled, and it shall not stand, and then replace it immediately with the truth of supply, because Florence Scovel Shinn was very precise about this part. An empty space in consciousness does not stay empty for long. Nature abhors a vacuum in the mind, just as much as anywhere else, so you must fill it yourself, quickly, deliberately, with a better word, otherwise the old word, given half a chance, will simply creep back into the space you just cleared, thinking it never truly left. Before we continue, if tonight's teaching is stirring something in you, there is another channel called Divine Manifestation that goes even deeper into these spiritual laws of supply. You may want to seek it out and let it walk beside you on this journey. The fourth key is allowing the false self to fall away so the real self can be seen. And here I want to be gentle with you, because Florence Scovel Shinn spoke often of a kind of death that must happen before abundance can fully arrive. And I want to be very clear about what that means. It does not mean anything physical. It does not mean anyone leaves this earth. It means the old poverty identity, the small anxious self that believes in lack, that flinches at bills, that apologizes for wanting more. That self must be allowed to dissolve, quietly, completely, so that the real self, the one made in the image of abundance, can stand fully in the light. Think of a person who has spent decades believing they are simply someone who struggles, who says things like, "I have never been good with money," or "People like me do not get lucky breaks," or "I always seem to lose right when things start going well." That self-concept is a mask, and masks feel like skin after enough years, so tightly worn you forget it can be removed at all. You introduce yourself with it at parties without even realizing you are doing so. "I am just not a money person," you say, laughing lightly, as if it were simply a fact of your birth like the color of your eyes. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that no mask is permanent unless you keep gluing it back on each morning with your own words. The death she spoke of is the death of that gluing, the death of identifying with lack, so that the truer, wealthier, more capable self can finally breathe. Picture a caterpillar. It does not become a butterfly by improving its caterpillar nature. It does not attend caterpillar seminars on how to crawl faster or store more leaves. It becomes a butterfly by that old form dissolving completely, and something new emerging that was always folded inside it, waiting, quietly, patiently, the whole time it was crawling. Your real self, the one aligned with supply, has been folded inside you the whole time too, underneath every anxious thought, underneath every apology for wanting more. Every time you catch the old identity speaking, the one who says, "I am always broke," or "nothing good ever comes my way," or things like this only happen to other people, gently let it go. Do not fight it. Do not shame it. Shame only glues the mask tighter. Simply stop feeding it your attention. Let it starve of belief the way a fire starves of air the moment you close the door on the room. And in its place, quietly begin claiming the identity of the one who is supplied. Say to yourself, "I am not the person struggling. I am the one abundantly provided for." And I release every old idea that ever said otherwise. Say it as many times as it takes for it to stop feeling like a performance and start feeling like a memory returning. This is not pretending. This is remembering. Because the false self was the costume, borrowed from other people's fears and other people's failures, and the supplied self was always the truth underneath it, waiting for the costume to finally be set down. The fifth key is guarding the gates of what you allow to enter your consciousness. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that consciousness is like a house, and every word spoken to you, every headline you read, every conversation you sit through, every comment section you scroll, is a visitor asking to come inside. And just because a visitor knocks, does not mean you are required to open the door. And even if the door is opened, that visitor does not have to be invited to stay for dinner, and move in, and rearrange your furniture. So many people leave their gates wide open all day, letting in every fearful word from the news at breakfast, every complaint from a coworker by the coffee machine, every doubt from a relative over the phone at lunch, every gloomy prediction from a stranger online by evening, and then wonder why their inner house feels crowded with worry by the time they finally lay their head down. But you are the gatekeeper, no one else, not the news anchor, not the relative, not the algorithm feeding you headlines. You, and you alone, get to decide. When someone says, "Business is terrible everywhere right now, nobody is spending," you can let that word walk right past your gate without ever crossing the threshold into belief. You can nod politely in conversation. You can even say, is that so?" While quietly, internally, refusing it entry. This is not coldness. It is not dishonesty. It is stewardship. It is simply tending your own garden with the same care you would want someone tending a garden that feeds your children. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that your consciousness is sacred ground, and whatever takes root there eventually shows up as your outer world. Your bank account, your opportunities, the very tone of your days. So guarding the gate might look like choosing not to scroll through certain conversations before bed, letting that scroll wait until morning when your defenses are stronger. It might look like politely changing the subject when a friend wants to spiral into money fears together over coffee. It might look like silently saying to yourself in the middle of a heavy conversation, "This is not for me, and I bless you and release you," even while your face remains warm and kind toward the person speaking. It might look like choosing, at the end of a long day full of other people's words, other people's fears, other people's tired old sentences about scarcity, to spend even 5 quiet minutes speaking your own truth over your life, out loud, so that your own voice is the last one echoing in the room before sleep. Because whatever word is spoken last, right before rest, tends to work all through the night, undisturbed, sinking deep into the soil of the subconscious, the way water sinks into ground that has been left soft and open. So if someone spoke against your money today, do not let their word be the last word you hear before you sleep. Speak over it, gently reclaim the gate, and let your own decree of supply be the final sound in the house tonight. Not the argument you had, not the headline you read, not the sigh from someone tired and afraid. Your own voice, quiet and certain. This single habit, guarding what enters right before sleep, can quietly change the entire tone of a life, because the subconscious does not argue with what it is given right before rest. It does not fact-check it. It does not ask for evidence. It simply accepts and begins building through the night, brick by unseen brick, exactly according to the last instruction it was given. The 6th key is establishing a nightly decree that seals your supply the way a lock seals a door. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that consistency in the spoken word is what turns a single affirmation into an established law. One good sentence spoken once is a seed, but the same good sentence spoken with feeling every night becomes a root system, deep and unshakable, strong enough that no passing wind of bad news can uproot it. So tonight, I want to give you a small ritual, nothing elaborate, nothing that requires special tools or candles or settings, though a candle is lovely if you have one nearby. Simply this: before you close your eyes each night, place one hand over your heart if that feels natural to you, and speak quietly. Every word spoken against my supply is canceled and forgiven. My supply flows to me freely from a source that cannot be blocked by any person, any circumstance, or any old sentence from my past. My word is my wand, and I use it now to bless my abundance and let it multiply while I rest. Say it slowly. Feel each phrase. Do not rush it the way you might rush through a grocery list. This small ritual, spoken with sincerity night after night, becomes over time what Florence Scovel Shinn might have called a sealing, because just as a door is not truly secured until it is locked, a day is not truly complete until its negative words have been addressed and canceled before rest. Think of every day as a room you walk through. Some words drop like coins on the floor, good ones, kind ones, hopeful ones, and some drop like broken glass, careless ones, frightened ones, cruel ones spoken by people who are themselves afraid. If you leave the broken glass lying there overnight, you or someone else may step on it tomorrow morning without even seeing it coming. But if you sweep the room clean each night with your own decree, you wake into a clear floor, ready for new coins to fall throughout the coming day. This is not superstition. This is simply the practical hygiene of consciousness. The same way you would not leave dishes to pile for a year and expect a clean kitchen to simply appear one morning on its own. You cannot leave months, sometimes years, of unspoken negative words piling quietly in the corners of your mind and expect a clean, uncluttered sense of supply to somehow emerge by accident. So let this nightly decree become as ordinary and necessary to you as brushing your teeth. Small, quiet, unremarkable to look at from the outside. No one else in the house even needs to know you are doing it. And yet slowly, over weeks and months, this simple habit rewires the entire relationship you have with money. Because you are no longer waiting for the outer world to hand you permission to feel abundant. You are no longer waiting for the economy to improve, or the relative to apologize, or the old memory to finally fade on its own. You are declaring it yourself, nightly, faithfully, patiently, until your own voice becomes the loudest and most trusted voice in the room, louder than any uncle, any headline, any old memory, any tired inherited sentence about scarcity, passed down like an unwanted family heirloom. Your own voice, steady, warm, certain. My word is my wand. Here is the whole picture. Someone spoke a word against your money once, maybe many times, over many years, and for a while you let it sit unchallenged, quietly gathering weight. But tonight you noticed the voice and named whose it truly was. You refused to argue with it, letting it pass by like wind past a mountain. You canceled it clean off the wall of your mind, the way a hand clears an old chalkboard. You let the old frightened self quietly dissolve so the true supplied self could stand up in its place. Unashamed, you began guarding the gate of what you allow inside, choosing your own voice as the last sound before sleep, and you gave yourself a nightly decree to seal it all in, before rest. None of this required anyone else's permission. None of it required the economy to change first, or your uncle to apologize, or the headlines to turn kind, or your childhood to be rewritten. It simply required your own word, spoken with quiet conviction, night after night if needed, and Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this is always enough, because the word, sincerely spoken, is a wand, and a wand does not beg the world to change. It simply moves, and the world rearranges around it. So say it with me one final time. No one on earth can speak poverty over my life. God supplies my every need at every turn. My word is my wand. And tonight, as you rest, know that whatever was spoken against you is already canceled, already fading, already losing its grip, because you have picked up your own wand again, and you have remembered, quietly and completely, that your money was never in their hands to begin with. It was always waiting on your word